Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. This is Dr. Asma Abdel-Rehim, a certified teacher from Cambridge. Today, inshallah, we are going to talk about a new part in our syllabus. Okay. Our chapter today is talking about coordination and response. Okay. Coordination and response. What is meant by coordination? We know that our human body consists of different organs, okay, and and a huge number of cells, okay. How these huge number of cells and these different organs are working together in the same time in a very efficient way to perform a specific function, okay. This is called coordination. So what is meant by coordination? Okay. What is mean by coordination, يا شباب? Coordination is meaning the way in which all organs and all cells are working together in a very, very efficient way at the same time to perform a specific function. Okay? In our body, we have two systems involved in the coordination process. First, we have the nervous system, and second, we have the endocrine system. These two systems are responsible for the coordinations between different organs. Okay, today we are going to talk about the nervous system. We are going to talk about what? Our nervous system. So in this chapter, we are going to describe the structure and the role of the nervous system. Okay, and we will going to explain how the nervous system is responsible for the coordination. And also we are going to talk about the structure and the function of something called synapse, which is going to be explained later. Okay. So first, our nervous system. Our nervous system consists of two parts. Okay. We have a central nervous system and we have a peripheral nervous system. Okay. So our nervous system have two parts. Okay, central and peripheral. Our central nervous system consists of, first, we have here our brain. Okay, so the first part in our central nervous system is our brain. Then we have the spinal cord, our spinal cords, okay, which is extend here in our vertebral column here. Okay, this is our central nervous system. So our central nervous system again consists of our brain and spinal cord. The second part in our nervous system is the peripheral nervous system. Peripheral nervous system consists of, first, we have our nerves. Okay, as you can see, our nerves here are extended and spread along our body. Okay, then we have a structure called receptors. Okay, we have a very tiny and very specialized structure called receptors. We are going to explain it later. Okay, but for now, our peripheral nervous system consists of nerves, okay, and something called receptors. Again, our nervous system consists of two parts. Central nervous system consists of brain and spinal cord. Peripheral nervous system consists of what? Nerves and different receptors spread along our body. Okay? Now I will give you an example to show you how our body feel about any change happening in the environment. Okay? For example here, this is a candle. Okay? The candle here make an increase in the temperature. Okay? The increase in temperature here, okay, consider a stimulus. Consider what? A stimulus. What is a stimulus? The stimulus, ya shabab, is anything lead to change in the environment. Lead to change in the environment in such a way that our body is not adapted to. Okay, this is not what my body is adapted to. Okay, any change away from the optimal is called what? Is called a stimulus. So the candle here, which make an increase in the temperature, consider as a stimulus. Okay? We have here our finger, which is covering with skin. Okay? Do you remember when I talked about the peripheral nervous system and said that we have something called receptors? Our skin here is covering with receptors. Okay? The receptors here that covering the skin, what it is responsible for? It is responsible for the detection of the stimulus. Detect any change happening. Okay, the receptors here detect any change happening away from the optimum. Okay, and it change this stimulus. Okay, into something called electrical impulse. Okay, so the receptor here detects the stimulus and change this stimulus into something called electrical impulse. It's like electricity, يا شباب. We have electricity in our houses and this electricity moves through wires. Okay, in our body is the same. The electrical impulse moves through something like wires. Okay, so the receptors here change the stimulus into electrical impulse, and this electrical impulse moves through a long wire. Okay, can you see the purple one? Okay, the electrical impulse moves through this wire until it reaches to the spinal cord. This is our spinal. In our spinal cord, this information, okay, in the form of the electrical impulse, begin to what? The spinal cord begin to understand this information, begin to understand there is something happening away from the optimal. So it changes this information into specific instructions. Instruction for what? Instruction to protect ourselves from these stimulus. Okay? So the instructor that formed inside our spinal cord are moved through another wire. Okay, the green one. Okay, so the electrical impulse here or the instructions here are moved through this wire until reach to our what? Our muscles here in our arm, leads to contraction of our arm, contraction of our hands, moving our finger away from the candle. Okay? So let's talk in a scientific way a little bit. So we said here we have a stimulus, any change happening in the environment, detected by receptors, which is located in a sensory organ here, in this example, our skin. The receptor change this stimulus into electrical impulse, which moves through a wire. This wire called sensory neuron, and we will explain what is mean by neuron and why we call this neuron sensory neuron. Okay, but the electrical impulse moves through these sensory neurons along up toward our spinal cord. In our spinal cord, this information is changed, okay, and processed into instruction. Sorry, our instructions here move through motor neurons, reaching our muscles, lead to a contraction of our hand away from the stimulus. Okay, this is called what? This is called a reflex, and we will talk about it later. Okay, but for now, this slide. Okay, we have sensory neuron. We call this one a sensory neuron. Why we said about this neuron is sensory neuron? Because it starts with receptors. It starts with what? Receptors. Receptors here spreads along our sensory organ, which is the skin. So, any sensory neuron must start with receptor found in the sensory organ and end with the spinal cord. This is the pathway of the sensory neuron, from receptors till spinal cord. This is motor neuron. Why we call it motor neuron? Motor, it means motion. Okay? Because it starts with the spinal cord and ends in our muscle here. Okay? Which is responsible for the motion. We have another neuron here we didn't talk about called relay neuron, or in some textbook called interneuron. The relay neuron is located here in the spinal cord. Can you see the yellow one here? This is the relay neuron. What is the function of the relay neuron? It's like a station, okay? Where the electrical impulse here, the information here from the sensory neuron transport or transfer to the motor neuron. Okay? It's like a station. Okay? Moving these electrical impulse here from the sensory to the motor neurons, the location of the relay neuron inside the spinal cord. So, when we say about neurons, okay, in this slide, we are explaining what? We are explaining what is called by reflex. What is meant by reflex? Reflex is an immediate action taken by our body. These actions are involuntary. We don't think about it, okay? We just do it to protect ourselves. Why we don't think about it? Because it originates from our spinal cord here. Okay, we call it a reflex. Okay, so we have some definitions here. Let's recap it a little bit. We have stimulus. We explain it. This is any change happening in the environment away from the optimal, away from what our body is adapted to. We have something called receptors. They are very specialized structures which detect any change happening in the environment. Okay, we in our body we have different receptors. Okay, and each receptors are sensitive to specific stimulus. For example, we have the receptors that we talk about it that are spread along our skin. These receptors are sensitive to what? Are sensitive to temperature, are sensitive to pressure, are sensitive to touch. Okay, we have different receptors here in our nose, for example. It's very sensitive to chemicals. Okay, anything irritant, we smell it. What are you going to do? You sneeze immediately. This is a reflex. Why? Because our receptor senses there is a change away from the optimum. And we have also receptors here in our eye, which are very sensitive to the wavelengths of the light. We have receptors in our ears, sensitive to change in vibrations. So we have different receptors. Each receptor is specific to a certain stimulus. Okay? Then we talk about neuron. Okay? We said we have sensory neuron, we have motor neuron. What are neurons are about? Okay? In every system, we have structural units in this system. When we talk about the nervous system, our structural unit is the neurons. This is neuron. Okay? What is the neuron? The neuron is the structural unit of the nervous system. The structure of the neuron is very important. Okay? First, we have something called here cell body. Okay? We have the cell body here. Then you can see there are extensions from the cell body. The cell membrane here is extended to increase the surface area of the cell body. These cytoplasmic extension or the surface extension called dendrites or dendrins in some textbooks. Okay, so we have here cell body and these branches are called dendrites. Inside the cell body we have nucleus. Okay, so we have three structures for now. We have the cell body and these branches are called dendrites, and inside the cell body we have nucleus. Okay, from the cell body, as you can see, there is a long filament that extended away from the cell body. Okay, this is called an axon. This is called what? An axon. This axon is covering with a myelin sheath. Myelin sheath. And it's very important, but its importance and its function, it's not required here in grade 10. Okay, we will talk about it in the A level, inshallah. Okay, so for now, we have an axon here. The axon here is covering with sheath. is called myelin sheath. Okay, this myelin sheath is made of Schwann cell. Okay, the myelin sheath here made from Schwann cell, the yellow or the orange one here. These are Schwann cells. Between the Schwann cells, you can see there are gaps here between the Schwann cells. It's called nodes of Ranvier. Node of Ranvier. Ranvier is the scientist that who discovered the nodes and the function and importance of these nodes. They are very important in the process of the transmission of the electrical impulse through the neurons. Okay, but you are not required to know about it now. Okay, these are the structures, different structure of the neuron. Again, we have the cell body. We have these branches called dendrites. Inside the cell body, we have nucleus. We have here long filaments extend from the cell body called an axon. We have a myelin sheath covering the axon. This myelin sheath is made from Schwann cell, and we have gaps here between the Schwann cells called nodes of Ranvier. These are the structure of the neurons. Okay, then we talk about the types of neuron. We said we have sensory neurons, we have a relay or interneuron, also we have the motor neuron. And we said the function of each one of it. We said that the sensory neuron extend here from the sensory organ. We have here the sensory organ which detects the stimulus and until it reaches to the spinal cord. So it starts with the sensory organ and end with the spinal cord. Then we have the interneuron or the relay neuron, which is located in the spinal cord and consider a station between the sensory neuron and the motor neuron. Finally, we have the motor neuron here, which is extended from the spinal cord and ended with the effector, which could be muscles or glands according to the stimulus. Okay? Okay. Then we talk about the reflex action. We said that any reflex action is immediate first response. Any response to a stimulus is characterized by is involuntary, unconscious, not involved in decision making. You don't think about it. You don't think if someone puts something closer to your eye, do I have to close my eye or just I will leave my eyes open? Okay, you don't think about it. You just think. Okay, it is protective. It is automatic. Okay, it's born with us. Anything born with us to protect our body is called reflex. Okay, we have different type of reflexes. We have blinking reflex, sneezing, knee jerk movement. What is the knee jerk movement? If someone hits you on your knee, okay, you move your leg immediately. The withdrawal reflex that we explained it before. Okay, this is the withdrawal reflex. You just withdraw your hand away from the candle here. Okay, so again, this is our stimulus. Okay, we have here the direction of the impulse. Okay, the receptor detects the stimulus. The electrical impulse move along this green neuron. This is the sensory neuron. You see it along until it reaches to the spinal cord. In the spinal cord here, this information, okay, change into instruction to protect our body, okay. Then it moves through the relay neuron and then to the motor neuron, okay. The instruction here moves through the motor neuron, the blue one, okay, until it reaches to our muscle, which withdraw our hand away from the stimulus. Okay, this is how we move our hand from the candle. Okay, what I explained here, this pathway, okay, the sensory, spinal cord, relay, motor, effectors. This is called what? This is called a reflex arc. This is called what? Reflex arc. What is the reflex arc? It is the pathway taken by the stimulus in a reflex action. Okay? The pathway of the electrical impulse through different neurons until a reflex action is taking place. Okay? So from here, the stimulus is detected by the receptor, okay, in the sensory organ. Then it transmitted through the sensory neuron until it reaches to what? It reaches to the spinal cord, where the relay neuron is found. Then the relay neuron transmits instructions. Okay, we don't now here have information. We have what? We have instructions. Okay, these instructions in form of electrical impulse. Okay, so these electrical impulse move through motor neurons until it reach what? It reach the effector. Okay, so this is a reflex arc. What is the reflex arc? It is a pathway taken by the stimulus. Okay, then we have something called synapse. This is the last thing we are going to talk about. What is meant by synapse? Okay, synapse is the space between two neurons. Okay, let's us imagine this is the end of one neuron. Okay, and this is the beginning of the adjacent neuron. Okay, this is the end of one neuron, and this is the beginning of the adjacent neuron, النيورون اللي جنبها على طول. Now we will going to learn and know how the electrical impulse that moves through one neuron jump to the other neuron. Okay, how the electricity here, the electrical impulse move along our body. Okay, from one neuron to another, to another, to another. Okay, here we have what? We have the end of one neuron. We call it pre-synaptic membrane. Pre before, it means before. Pre يعني before. Okay, this is the synapse. What is the synapse? It is the gap or the space between two neurons. Okay, this is the synapse, or we call it synaptic cleft. Okay, the gap between two neurons. The membrane before the synapse, the synaptic cleft, called presynaptic membrane. The membrane before the synaptic cleft, sorry, after the synaptic cleft, called postsynaptic membrane. So we have here presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane. And this is called all the synapse. Okay? The space between the presynaptic and the postsynaptic membrane is called synaptic cleft. Okay? So we have here presynaptic membrane and postsynaptic membrane, and the gap here called presynaptic cleft. What happened inside the synapse? Okay, first the electrical impulse here reach to the end of the neuron. Okay, we have inside the presynaptic membrane vesicles. Can you see these vesicles? We call it synaptic vesicle. Okay, this circle. Okay, vesicle. We call it vesicles. The vesicles inside it called there are structures called neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters. So inside the vesicles we have structures called neurotransmitters. When the electrical impulse moves through the neuron and reach to the presynaptic membrane, it enhances these vesicles, the synaptic vesicles, ماشي, to move towards the end of the presynaptic membrane and fuse with it. Okay, can you see it? The vesicle here fuse with the presynaptic membrane. And the neurotransmitter here begin to move through the synaptic cleft. Okay, It's open, the vesicle open, and the neurotransmitter moves through the synaptic knot and attach to the postsynaptic membrane. Once the neurotransmitter attached to the postsynaptic membrane, the electrical impulse here in the presynaptic moves to the postsynaptic. Okay? The electrical impulse here in this neuron jump to the adjacent neuron. So, how the electrical impulse move from one neuron to another neuron? Just when these vesicles fuse with the presynaptic membrane. Okay? And the neurotransmitter begin to move through the synaptic cleft until it reach to the postsynaptic membrane and join with the receptors that found in the postsynaptic membrane. Okay? This is called what? This is called synapse. The synapse is very important in the transmission of the electrical impulse throughout our body. Okay? From one neuron to the adjacent neuron. So, in this session, we learn about the nervous system. We talk about the structure and the different part of the nervous system, the central and the peripheral nervous system. We talk about the reflexes, okay, and the reflex arm, which is the pathway of the stimulus through the reflex action. We talk also about a structure called synapse, which is very important, and we said it is the space between two neurons, okay, which is responsible for the transmission of the electrical impulse from one neuron to the adjacent neuron. I hope this session become useful for you, and we are going to meet in the next session, inshallah. Goodbye.